now going to cut 4 joints for a box, going through the situation where all sides of the box are the same height. In this situation we can do it with the stop in one position on the jig. I'll start by marking the outside face of each board and the bottom edge of each board, so I know which way to put the work on the jig and which way to assemble the finished box. So each piece has the outside face mark and a bottom edge mark. Once again, the timber's standing vertically on the jig, positioning it sideways to get the layout of the joint that I want. Just by eye, you don't have to position it perfectly symmetrically across the fingers on the template. Clamping securely in place, and it's important when you clamp your work in place that you always check that the clamp is safely above the cutter before you turn the router on. Setting the height of the cutter, sliding stop is up against the edge and locked in place. The speed of cutting is quite important. Too fast and you will end up with tear out. Too slow and you will end up with burning. Ideally, each initial cut into the timber should take about 3 seconds to complete. 1, 2, 3. Note that I go back over the same cut several times. For the other end of this board, I rotate the board end for end, keeping the same outside face away from the jig. It's important with all the cutting that it's the outside of the project that's always away from the jig. Dovetail slots on one side finished. Exactly the same procedure for the second side of the box. Again, turning that board end for end, keeping the same face away from the jig, clamping in place and making sure that clamp is safely above the cutter. It is hard to see, but each cut is actually a U-shape, running in one side and out the other. The reason for this is that the diameter of the guide bearing is slightly narrower than the gap between the fingers. So now we have all the dovetail slots finished. For the cutting the matching pins, we come round to the other side of the jig without moving the stop, up against the stop with the outside of the project facing away from the jig, clamping securely in place, and now we're changing over to the straight cut in the router. Once again, setting the height of the cutter to the thickness of the timber, or it doesn't hurt if it's just that little bit higher. It doesn't have to be exactly the same height as that first cutter. Cutting the pins takes longer as there is more timber to cut away. A common mistake is not keeping the outside face away from the jig when turning the board end for end. I often get phone calls where puzzled customers cannot assemble the box because of this mistake. Once again, we're turning the timber end for end, keeping the same outside face away from the jig, up against the stop, clamping back in place. When cutting the pins, note that I run across the face of the board before cutting through the board. This method gives the cleanest cut. There we've got pins finished on both ends of one side of the box. Exactly the same procedure on the second side of the box. Again, turning that board end for end, keeping the face out. So, when cutting the pins, each cut takes about 5 seconds to complete. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all 4 joints finished. We can now assemble the box, taking note of our marking out that we've got all the bottom edges around the right way. There we've got all joints finished, perfectly aligned. The function of the sliding stop on the jig is to align the edges flush. So as long as both pieces are up against the stop, it automatically aligns the edges and there's no marking out or guesswork involved.